Welcome to the You Need a Training podcast, hosted by Heart and Solutions, a strength-based counseling agency. We know that the life of a mental health professional can be busy, and finding time to complete those continuing education credit hours can be a challenge. With that in mind, this show is focused on helping mental health providers easily access continuing education credits on a variety of topics. The best part? These trainings, many of which will provide at least one credit hour, can be completed anywhere you listen to your podcasts. Traveling to and from work? Great. Taking a walk? Excellent. Enjoying a quiet moment on the couch? Perfect. No matter where you are, get ready for engaging, thought-provoking conversations that double as CE hours, because we all know you need a training.
Hello, welcome to another episode of the You Need a Training podcast. I am Dr. Colleen Grote, the Vice President of Therapy at Heart and Solutions. I have a PhD in counselor education and supervision. I'm a licensed mental health counselor and a registered play therapist supervisor. We are joined again today by Kendra Gliem. Kendra currently works as a BHIS Supervisor and Provider in the Waterloo, Cedar Falls area for Heart and Solutions. Kendra also enjoys being a part of the theater community in her area by teaching youth classes at the Black Hawk Community Theater and auditioning for shows when she can. Kendra often utilizes her theater training when working with her clients in order to help them improve their behaviors and become well-rounded individuals. She is thrilled, she tells us, to be joining the podcast once more. So if you haven't listened to her earlier episode, please be sure to do that. But we are going to continue talking about her experiences, how it relates to her work with children. So again, if you haven't listened to that first episode with Kendra, please be sure to go check that out, because today we're going to continue a conversation about how theater can be used to help children, specifically children on the autism spectrum, become well-rounded individuals, work on improving their behavioral challenges. So Kendra is skilled at utilizing theater techniques and helping children learn to utilize those techniques to be able to better build their social skills, work on things like active listening, conflict resolution, and many important skills. So today we are going to focus on how to learn to comfortably apply theater techniques within a clinical setting to assist your clients, how to identify multiple games that can be utilized for various skill building, and learn how to apply theater techniques to everyday scenarios and interaction. And you guys, I can tell you firsthand, since we recorded the first episode until today, I was really fortunate to get to spend some face-to-face time with Kendra, and she utilized some of these interventions with me and some others, and they really were a great experience. So Kendra, I can't wait to hear what you have to share with us today.
Awesome. Thanks for having me back. Our retreat that we did where we got to do some theater games was really fun. And I know sometimes it scares people when, we're not all theater people. I love the arts. I love doing theater. It's for me. But a lot of people don't realize that some of these games that we use in our work. So a lot of play therapy, when I've taken trainings in the past for play therapy, I'm like, this is a theater game. Do they know this is a theater game? I'm like, did you know that this is actually based in theater? It's so much fun. But because theater is play, it's creativity, it's working on your feet, it's coming up with creative ideas to apply to your own personal life. So it is really cool how much theater actually is a part of our everyday life, and we just don't realize it. A lot of people think theater is play pretend, you know what I mean? Like we're pretending to be something else. But actually, a lot of times we are applying our real life experiences to what we are putting into our theaters, our like theater shows and exercises and things like that. So that's actually some things I'll be talking to you a bit today about how we can, relate our own personal lives to maybe pretend, right? Potentially scripts, things like that. And how I utilize that in my behavioral work. So with kids. So it's pretty cool that I get the opportunity to do both. And that was something that I really strongly as I, figured out what I wanted to do with my life, realized that I wanted to do theater, but I wanted to apply it in this type of work with kids. So it's pretty fun that I get to do that.
Yeah, what an incredible combination. And I love that you highlighted sort of the fact of like, do play therapists know they're doing theater? And the answer is no, right? Because if you told me you're doing theater games, I'd be like, no, I'm not, right? Like, but when we kind of set it up in such a way that it feels like what we know or what we're skilled at or confident in, much different approach, right? So I love sort of the sneakiness of like, I know you're doing theater, right? And so for our listeners today too, like, don't let that theater approach scare you off, right? Like, please stick around, please hear her out, because these interventions are phenomenal.
Yeah, you don't have to be over the top. You don't have to be someone you're not. That's actually the cool part about theater is that, and specifically kids on the spectrum, is that, a lot of times kids on the spectrum, they don't know how to be anyone but themselves. If you can try to ask them to be, a pretend character, and a lot of times, unless you've taught them how, they're going to be like, no, I'm me. So getting, kids to apply themselves in that character, quote unquote, and be themselves while also being this other person or character, is really what it's about. So yeah, and I actually, I have some games. I believe the last thing I talked about on our last training, I did start to get into some storytelling. And I know we talked about A/B conversations where, one person gets a specific line they have to say, and the second person has another line that they say back, and back and forth. And they're very vague, right? The A/B conversations are very vague. So you can interpret them however you need to interpret them. That game is awesome because it helps you work a lot on actively listening to the other person, so you can take in the information and then give back the response you think is appropriate. It helps kids a lot with like social skills too. Actively listening to their parents and taking in, the truth behind the words, basically. But when we are working towards getting kids into potentially maybe being in plays or maybe doing some improv as they get older, doing more scene work is going to be really important. So that's kind of what I want to talk about today is doing some more improv-y type, scene type work that can be applied in a behavioral setting as well. So my first one that I really love to do, especially kids on the spectrum, sometimes it's a lot easier for us to use our bodies, right? So we show a character through just using our bodies. We don't have to speak. We don't have to, again, be over the top. We don't have to do anything that's going to make us uncomfortable. So first, building that trust in a classroom is huge. We always will build up to these activities. We never ever start with these activities. The ones I'm going to talk about are building up to, basically. And a lot of these activities I'll talk about are for more, I would say, probably 11 and up. You can alter them to be for younger kids, but a lot of times I would suggest doing ages 11 and up, just because they are a bit harder and it takes skill building to get to these. So, building off of our last podcast, right? So, the first one I really like, and I actually wanted to do it at the retreat, but we ran out of time, is called negative space. So this is where you get a group of kids. Let's say you have a small group of kids, right? You only have maybe 6 kids in a classroom. You would get half of the class to get up and make a pose. That's what I always say. I say, just make a pose. And it doesn't have to be anything wild or crazy. You know, some kids' poses may literally just be them standing there. That's fine. You know, we'll come up with other stuff as we go. And some kids just need to see other kids doing the activity and creating thoughts or be given some ideas in order for them to move forward and come up with their own stuff. So I know I've had students who are like really obsessed with Monster High right now. So they've become a character they've seen on the TV, right? And I'm like, that's great. Go for it. I do a lot of yes anding. That's what we do in improv, right? Yes and yes, yes, yes. We are building on what you've said. So with negative space though, like I said, we're not speaking, at least not right away. So once these kids are up there, then I, depending on the group, will ask, what do you think they're doing in this scene here? And the kids who are, let's say 3, the kids who are in the audience have to come up with, well, I think that person is doing this, or I think that person is doing this. And then we create a scene collaboratively in order to have them then act it out if they feel comfortable. Sometimes, like if you have that kid who's just standing there, someone might say, I think that kid's a tree. And okay, that's all right. They're a tree. So when I say, you know, act out what we've just created, basically, I give them 10 seconds to act out their characters. So the person who's a tree, if that's what they feel most comfortable with, just standing there being a tree, that's okay. You can just stand there, maybe sway a little, like if you're in the wind or something, or maybe they get a boost of bravery and they're like, I'm actually a talking tree now. So they start talking and blah, 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 blah. You know, they start interacting with the people around them. Again, a lot of times we have to build up to that. It takes a lot of getting through awkwardness, having one kid or one person, a lot of times that person is me, being a little bit over the top and being goofy in order to show that it's okay. We're in a safe space. It's okay. And with kids with sensory needs, like kids on the spectrum, sometimes this activity, once we feel comfortable being these characters, can get a little loud. So I always remind everyone, quiet voices, right? Our characters don't need to be screaming. Our characters don't need to be, you know, harshly yelling or anything like that. We can use quiet voices, just so that way we're not overstimulating some of our students and making it uncomfortable. So, but then, so after we've done all of that, right? This is only the beginning of this activity. Then after their 10 seconds, I tell them to freeze and whatever position they're in, because sometimes their characters move, right? They're now in a new position. And I tell the audience kids to go fill in the space. They have to fill in that negative space. So they're going up and maybe one person is like pretending to hug the other person, or one person, I know I get a lot of kids who like to lay down in between legs, right? So they'll lay down in between the legs, or they'll do a funny pose around their friends. And then I tell them to freeze, stay there. And then I tell the original 3 to leave. So they have to now leave the space and come back into the audience. And then I tell them the same thing. What do you think they're doing here? And the kids are always like, what? No, I had something else in mind. And I say, I know you did. And now we're changing it. So it causes them to have to use their creativity to come up with a different scene. You know, they're communicating with one another about the scene ahead. You know, they're trying to decide maybe what's appropriate for the statues that are there, you know. It's one of my very favorite games. It's a lot of teamwork building, and you can adjust it for larger groups or even smaller groups. Like sometimes I might only have 4 kids in class. That's okay. I now get to participate too. Or even if there's only 3 kids, I get to participate too. And it helps them relax and feel more comfortable with what we're doing. And now they're building scene work. And a lot of times I'll have this be one of our first activities after our warm up. So then it gives them ideas moving forward to our last activity or like, any activities that we're doing afterward, it gives them ideas later on, well, remember that character I was earlier in negative space? I want to be that character now. Great. Let's do it. Let's build on that character, right? So I just really, really love that activity. It's so much fun. And it also causes them to be aware of like their surroundings and what they're doing. And, always reminding them, be appropriate, make sure that we're not touching someone if they don't, give you permission, things like that. Boundary setting, all this great behavioral work that, I am always trying to help our kids with, to help make them, the most well-rounded kids, just like I said. So, yeah.
Of it too, and I love that you mentioned like it can be modified for smaller groups too, because I'm thinking about a family BHIS session or a family therapy session, right? And especially the concept of, okay, like I had a plan and now this plan changed. We have lots of families that struggle with those types of situations, right? And so kind of implementing this creative, fun way to address that, right? And I love the idea you talked about, right, of like respecting the space that they're in. We have kids who, my youngest calls them, body bubbles, right? But learning like how big is my body bubble or the bubble of the space I'm in. And so my brain is like, okay, but if we did it, at family therapy, we could even make the physical space smaller, right? To kind of have to control our body bubble even more. So yeah, I love the implications of this both in the theater and in the therapeutic setting as well.
Yeah, well, and kids on the spectrum love routine, and having to deal with sudden changes can be really hard on them. So this activity is also really helpful in that way, in preparing them for potential changes that could occur at any time, right? We don't know that life is going to be consistent all the time. If only, right? If only we could predict how life is going to be constantly. But unfortunately, that is the biggest, I would say one of the biggest challenges for kids on the spectrum is that they love that routine. They love knowing what's going to happen, but we just can't. We can't know what's going to happen all the time. And it allows for them to, see different ways to approach those changes as they occur and things like that. It's still going to be hard, absolutely, but they may be able to start thinking creatively in those moments of, well, yeah, I'm really upset that this change has happened in my life that was really sudden and I wasn't expecting it. It could be anything from, I was planning on going to school today and now we have a snow day. I didn't plan for this. This is upsetting. But it gives them the opportunity to creatively think, what can I do with my day then? So I love this activity. It's awesome. It's one of the coolest.
Kind of connect to a character they've developed in this game and sort of use that as a source of support later, right? Okay, my day was disrupted. It is a snow day. I, as the adults, right, may prompt, yeah, but we're going to be like blah, blah, blah character, right? Like, has anybody ever latched on and kind of successfully been able to use that as a source of support for other social situations?
I actually don't know. Those kids don't tell me anything they do after they leave my classroom. they don't tell me I'm pretty positive they have. Like I said, I get those kids who come into my classroom already being like, I have this character I really like and I'm obsessed with them right now and I'm going to use that. I'm sure they probably use that as a coping skill whenever they create characters. I had a kid who really loved goats for some reason for a long time, and he always made everything about goats. And I was like, that's so funny. I love that. Keep it up. And I'm pretty positive he in his everyday life also continued to use the character of his goats, you know what I mean, into probably a coping skill in some way. But I wish they told me. Now I kind of want to start asking, being like, oh, have you used that character outside of class? That would be fun. Yeah, that's so funny. I like that. I hope that they do. Just thinking about it, I'm like, oh my gosh, I bet they do. But yeah, so I can move on to my next one that I like to do. So along with the improv part of this, it definitely helps with unexpected changes and things like that. You know, improv is all about yes and, right? Like I was talking about. We have these rules of improv where, you can't ask questions that are yes or no. You have to have open-ended questions, right? That gets really hard for kids sometimes because they want to just do a yes or no question. I'm like, well, kind of kills the scene, right? We have to say yes and, because that's the number one rule of improv is yes and. You must go along with whatever your scene partner says because it kills the scene otherwise. But like, we're not allowed to ask open-ended questions. We're not supposed to make our scene partner look bad. We're always uplifting them, right? Which is also another good skill in life. Don't put your partner down, bring them up. So there's just lots of, well, not lots of rules, but there are strict rules with improv because it will kill the scene, right? And so we always want to make sure that we're paying attention to the rules. And that's a lot of times why I'm there is as the teacher is, I'm teaching them these improv skills. I'm teaching them these improv scenes. I'm teaching them all this stuff. So that way, if we go astray, I can be like, oh, remember rule number whatever, and point to the poster that I've made that's like, see, here's this rule, right? And so one of my very favorite improv games that we play is called Why Are You Late? It's a good warm-up because kids love to, talk about why people are in trouble. They like to gossip. They like to, you know what I mean? So it gives them the opportunity to be a teacher and also a student who's late and also a student in a classroom. So this game, Why Are You Late, is about a student arriving to school late. So what you do is you have one person who's the teacher. A lot of times I will be the teacher just to keep and maintain control, but also to model how you need to be the teacher. But there's one person who's the teacher in the middle of the classroom in a chair. And there's one student who has to be out in the hallway so they can't hear us discuss why they were late. Because they're going to be coming into the classroom not actually knowing why they were late. Their other classmates in the back are going to act out with their bodies why they were late. So when we send one person into the hallway, we, as a teacher and other classmates, discuss why were they late. They have to come up with 3 reasons that they have to act out. And the kids always want to do something spectacular. They're like, they got a huge bus crash and then they had to go to the hospital. I'm like, okay, well, we need to maybe make it more specific, right? So it works on them being specific, not too vague. But we, come up with, let's say they slept through their alarm. Then they had a flat tire on their bicycle. And then a lot of times I will let them do one extravagant one, but it still has to be very specific. So they'll be like, a bat swooped them up or something like that. So that's why they're late. But the person out in the hallway doesn't know that. They're guessing what our classmates are saying. So when they come in, this one is a little more complicated. This is why I say it must be like a certain age, just because it gets really hard to do it as younger kids. But basically what happens is when the student who is late comes in, the teacher says, I see you've decided to arrive to class. Why are you late? And the student says, well, and then they have to watch the kids behind them acting out what they did. And they have to start guessing. And the teacher interacts with the student kind of, well, let's say they're saying, oh, well, I was sleeping. You were sleeping and that's why you're late. Well, and then the kids might be like, no, but they can't say anything out loud. They have to use their bodies. So they might be going, like, no. And then a lot of times I, as the teacher, will turn around and I'll be like, what are you guys doing? So then they have to pretend to be, oh, I'm sorry. I was just getting I was getting an eraser, or I dropped my pencil over here. I was just getting it really quick. Sorry, teacher. And then I turn back around and I'm like, so anyway, why were you late? So they think it's so much fun because there's a lot of moving parts to it, right? So the kids in the back are only using their bodies. It's interpreting body language, right? We are working on understanding what somebody else is saying without using verbal communication. The student has to use their, creativity and work on their the kids in the back have to work on their impulses because they gotta, sit really quick. Oh, yep, sorry. And stuff like that. Works on communication, teacher to student, right? The kids just really love it. Is a little chaotic. They love the chaos of it. So, but if it starts to get like too loud or anything like that, I do always remind them, okay, let's settle down, kids. Let's settle down. So we a lot of times as the teacher, that's a good reset button for them, right? If they're starting to get kind of loud in the back, I'm like, hey, why are you talking? I thought we weren't supposed to be talking. And they're like, oh, yep, sorry. And then they sit down and it's a good reset. And then I won't start again until everyone's quiet. So it's helping, work on, like I said, those impulses to be loud and do those things, but also following directions, right? We have to listen and follow directions in order to get the game going and to get the game completed. So, it's also really satisfying to watch the kids get so excited when the student who's late guesses all three things correctly. They're like, yes, you did it. That's right. And we always do a little ding, 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 ding when they get it right. So that way they know they've gotten it right. So that one is a little more complicated, but it's also one of my favorites because it's so much fun. Just to, kids are like, oh yeah, I've been late before. And this is where we start to relate our own lives into these scenes, right? I've been late to class before. It's embarrassing. It's not fun to be late. It's not fun to get called out by the teacher. But in this setting, we can make it fun and we can make it not as much pressure to be like, yep, I'm late to class and this is not fun. So
I love that, right? And being able to kind of normalize that social occurrence, right? And again, my therapeutic brain is like, I wonder what that would be like, right? To do other situations in a BHIS session or in therapy, or even feelings, right? I'm mad because, and have them pick 3 reasons somebody might feel mad or sad or happy, right? Like just the limitless kind of implications of really making that fun. And then, like you said, all of those teamwork pieces of having to work together and communicate in ways that are outside of the box.
Yeah, and I love that, in a family session, altering that to anything, it really can be adjusted to whatever you need it to be. My favorite is to do the why are you late to class, but it could also be why are you late to work, or why are you mad? Why are you sad? Why are you, you know what I mean? Or it could even be like, what did you do yesterday? It can be made into whatever you need it to be. And yeah, I really love the adaptability of that game as well. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds like a great one.
Moving into more scene based work, that's a game, but a lot of times with improv, it is just 1 or 2 people on a stage, or in the classroom just in front of their other classmates. And these improv things can be used in sessions as well. It's really nice. But yeah, a lot of improv games make me think of family sessions too, Colleen. And it's great because sometimes I sit here and I think, oh my gosh, how could I adapt that for my clients when they're having troubles with communicating with their parents, or they're having troubles communicating with their siblings, or they're having troubles, really doing anything with the people around them. And so one of the ones that I haven't used yet in session, but I think I'd like to try is a game called Freeze. So it's an improv game. You get up and, it's a classic two people in front of an audience, someone tell me where we're at, someone tell me what's the, conflict, and then they get to go. We always have one person be the designated starter of the scene. They get a couple seconds to think, how do I want to start this? Okay, let's go. And so once they've gotten, the scenario and the place, then they get to move forward with that scene. What's unique about freeze is that you get to have multiple scenes. So let's say you start off with the scene the audience gives you, you're on the moon, and your tether to the spaceship has broken. Maybe that's the situation. Super scary, super dangerous, but you're going to go with it. They'll start the scene, and whenever somebody in the audience has an idea because of something they're doing, they say freeze, and everyone has to freeze. For this game, we encourage big movements because it helps create those potential ideas for other scenes. So when we say freeze, whoever in the audience had said freeze gets to go up and pick one of the people. Let's say, we got someone like pointing, or someone's doing this, or maybe like trying to pull them back, right? They get to go up and tap the person they want to take over. And when you get tapped, you have to exit the scene. And that person takes over with whatever they were doing. Let's say they're pulling. They take over that pose and they start a completely new scene. And they are now creating the situation and the conflict. So the person that they're in the scene with now has to change. This is one of my more favorite challenging improv games to use with my kids when I teach improv, because the part that I find they struggle with the most is changing the scene. And so I always have to remind them, I'm like, I'm always like, pause. We're in a different scene. What did they just say? It's because they don't actively listen. They want to stay in what they had. It's that sudden change, right? So it's really cool to watch them think, okay, I'm in a different scene. What's another character I could play, right? Quick thinking. We got to think quickly on our feet. We have to adapt to this change. We have to be actively listening to our partner who is right in front of us. We need to pay attention to their body language because, they're starting a completely new movement. They may have been pulling because the tether was broke. I'm going to save you. And now they're like, row the boat. We're moving fast. Like, we got to go or something. And they have to be like, yep, now I'm on a boat. Okay. So with improv, and this one I really want to, I kind of want to try with one of my families, is because they struggle to communicate with each other, right? So this causes them to have to listen to each other. They have to adapt to what the other one's saying, and they have to jump in full force, right? I get some older teen clients, they get a lot of attitude with their parents. This causes them, they have to yes and. They can't say no. It's a big one for some of my clients. They want to say, no, that's a dumb idea. Or no, I don't like that you are doing that. Or I don't like that you approached it that way. Or I don't like how you're doing this game that we're playing. Or, it's a lot of no against my parents. This would allow for them to have to agree, yes, and see how they can go along, right, with mom and dad, how they can go along with those viewpoints, and vice versa. Maybe mom and dad really don't like the way that their child approaches certain situations. This allows them to have to go with it and have to, move into the situation and be okay with it. And they have to go along with it and see from their point of view, right? We're seeing different points of view. We're going along with the challenge. So, and this one is also really adaptable because, you don't have to do it with your body. You don't have to get up and do the scene. You could just be sitting at a table and you're discussing a scenario, right? Like, oh, I would, oh gosh, I'm trying to think of a really good example. It would be like, maybe we bring up a situation that happened earlier in the week, right? Okay, now we're role playing this scenario again, but in this point, we're freezing, right? Maybe mom is saying something to child's reacting, and dad comes up with an idea of a better way to react to the situation. He's freeze, and he comes in and says something different. And then maybe you get a different reaction out of the child. Or maybe dad is seeing a way that the child could react to mom better. Freeze, jump in and react. It's a lot of modeling too for your clients that way, because they can see like, oh yeah, maybe I could have reacted a little differently to that, right? And I just really like improv is so fun. But it's a challenge. It's really hard, and it's not for the faint of heart. You gotta try. And it's quite a challenge, but it can be adapted for your needs again. So yeah, I really love freeze as well.
Absolutely. And I love what you were saying too, of like sometimes we get so caught up in how we're going to respond, right? Okay, I know mom is gonna say I shouldn't have done whatever, right? And we get so caught up in I'm gonna say that it was this. We don't listen. And so that change of scene, right? That being able to have to actively listen and pay attention and stay engaged and really focus on what someone else is saying versus what we're going to say back is such an important skill, especially for kids and families, right, who are kind of improving their communication.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are various ways to approach those like scene works for improv. Like if you've ever gone to an improv show, they have tons and tons of different games like that where they're getting feedback from an audience and then moving forward with it and playing off of each other. But clinically, it's really interesting to think about how it could work for families. You know what I mean? So yeah, but freeze is by far my favorite one. There's another one that we call pockets, where we write sentences beforehand, and you have to put them in your pocket. You draw them out of a hat, you put it in your pocket, and then as you're interacting, typically we assign one person, so typically me as the teacher, to say pocket, and they have to freeze. One person has to take out a piece of paper, they read the sentence, and it completely changes the scene, right? Another good way to put that into, our sessions and things is maybe adding some sentences that they hear a lot or adding a different reaction. For example, I just did an exercise with one of my families where we, share what we said, what we heard, and what we meant, right? And it was a very good exercise. It worked out great. But that's something you can utilize with that pockets. We're having a conversation, pause, pockets. You need to pull out this sentence that would relate. And of course, the sentences in those situations should be pretty vague, because it would need to relate to potentially several conversations. But if you're hearing things frequently from parents or kids, like if they're hearing things frequently from each other, they may need a different way to word something. That's great. Write it on this piece of paper.
And what was it? It's what I said, what I heard, and what I meant.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I said, I heard, I meant. Yep.
The fact that in that situation, what I said is written down, right? And this is a terrible analogy, but what it makes me think of is those current commercials where they like pull the football challenge flag, right? And they're like, let's go back and watch the replay. Like, I think that it's awesome that like, okay, no, like this is what I said. It's right here. But then being able to explore, this is what I heard, and this is what I meant. Like, I love that concept. And as with all of your interventions, like the applications are limitless there. But those, from a communication standpoint, those three things are really different. And, thinking about even conversations we have at my house, right? It's like, no, this is what I said. And they're like, no, you said this. Well, thinking about it from this way, right? No, this is what I said. If they would word it back of like, but this is what I heard, my defenses go down because they're not telling me what I said now, right? Because when you tell me, you said to get my jacket on, and I'm like, no, what I said was get your shoes on, right? Like, or whatever it may be. As the person speaking, it's easy to get defensive. No, I said get your shoes on. But if they can say, well, what I heard was get your jacket on, and I can say, well, what I meant was you need to get your shoes and your jacket on, right? Or whatever. Like, yeah, what an incredible kind of everyday concept, but hearing it played out like that, and in a way that is safe, right? When we do this kind of gameplay initially, it's safe. And then kind of like we were talking about with your other interventions, being able to take that and transition it over later so that hopefully kind of all on their own, families will start going, hey, what I said was it's time to go to school. What I heard was we have to go to school in 10 minutes, right? Or whatever.
Yeah. And I challenge my clients to work on that in the upcoming weeks. Actually, I was like, when you hear something that you think is defensive or upsetting, tell your mom or your child, this is what you said, but this is what I heard. So that way they can start communicating that better. Yeah. I'm actually very interested to hear how it went this week. So yeah, it's pretty cool that, these, and because they're so adaptable, you can change the rules a little bit to apply to what you need in the moment. And actually, I do have one more. I know we're going to run out of time eventually, but I have one more that I had done with one of my clients as well. So something that I learned in college, actually, for myself when going into, doing theater scenes and working on stage, was we did a lot of, scene work. We look at our monologues, we look at our text in our plays, and we relate them to our lives, specifically in moments that are potentially heavy. If there are words that really resonate with us in our script, we oftentimes would like circle them and we would write little notes that are, this really related to me in my own life because of this, because then we can take that up onto the stage and it feels more relatable to the audience. It feels more real, right? Something that one of my professors said is that theater is just telling the truth, but it's your own truth, right? You're telling your own truth through a character. You're never lying on stage. You're never pretending. You're always bringing yourself into your character. So that's something I take with me for everything. So even like reading books, when I'm reading books, I'm like, yep, I can relate to this. I'm bringing my truth to this character, right? So something that I've actually adapted with that is with songs, right? We feel vast emotions with like all different kinds of songs. So the exercise that I ended up doing with my client was I asked her to find a song that she really likes. And I said, it doesn't have to be a happy one, right? It doesn't have to be a happy song. It can be a song that maybe sounds really mad, but the words might mean something different. Or maybe it's a really sad song and you need to feel that sadness in this moment, right? Or something like that. And I had her print out the lyrics and we went through and related that back to her life. And she was then able to kind of feel a little bit more deeply when she listened to the song, but it also gave her a different perspective on the song because she, was like, well, I mostly just listen to this song because it sounds sad. And I'm like, okay, it sounds sad, but are the words sad? Because I know plenty of songs that sound sad, but are actually pretty happy, right? Or same with, there are lots of upbeat, happy songs that are actually, when you look at the lyrics and like actually think about it, it's pretty sad. Or like you can tell there's lots of anger in that song, but it's really upbeat. And you're like, this is kind of weird that I know all these lyrics, but the meaning is different. Though the song I actually like to bring up for that is Closing Time. Have you ever heard that song? Yeah. Okay. So closing time, everybody always thinks it's about, leaving a bar. Like it's 2 a.m. You got to go home, No, he wrote that song for his daughter who was in the NICU for like months. He wrote it about his own child, and it's about a baby. Like when I found that out and I listened to it again, I was like, what? This is completely different now. Now I can never listen to this song the same again, right? Completely changed my viewpoint on that. So, yeah, so what we do, is you can take paragraphs of text, or you could take a song and you can sit down and just read it line by line. How does this relate to my life? How does this make me feel? How does this make me feel about other people, maybe? Or does this remind me of somebody else? And then when you're, singing that song, or in this context, when we get up to perform a scene with our scene partners, what we're doing is we're remembering those things that we wrote down, not saying them, just remembering them and feeling it in the moment. We're attaching the meaning behind the words. So that way, when we're speaking to our scene partner, they can feel the realness behind our words. They can feel our feelings, right? It's understanding that empathy, bringing in the empathy. So, and sometimes younger kids, they need to be taught how to be empathic to other people. And so definitely kids on the spectrum, because they're oftentimes taught different things. And when they're processing stuff in the world, a lot of times it is very about me, because that's how their brains work, right? So helping them understand empathy and relating things to your own life, so that way also it brings a lot more power to your words. um I'm a very empathic person. So when people are speaking to me, whether they know it or not, I'm feeling what they're saying. I tell people a lot of times that when I walk into a room, I can feel the energy. It's very odd. I wish I could share what I feel when I walk into a room with people. A lot of times it's how I know my clients have had a bad week. I'll knock on the door, and just by them answering the door, I'm like, it was a rough week, wasn't it? And they're like, how'd you know? I'm like, I just felt the energy. It's like it hit me, So, getting to do this type of work where you relate your own life to the words that you're speaking, even though they're not your words, I think is a really cool way to help teach kids that empathy, and help teach them, how your words affect other people, and how you say them affects other people. Yeah.
I love that perspective taking piece of that too, right? Again, thinking from a session focus, right? And whether that's with siblings or parents and children, or even individuals, right? Like looking at common songs or statements or whatever it may be, right? Even things that maybe another family member has written. My brain also goes to the wonderful world of social media, right? And posts that maybe have upset an adolescent, right? And looking at it of, okay, like let's take this line by line. Let's talk through what this means to you versus maybe what it meant to mom, right? Or what it meant to your sibling who wrote it or did this, right? Like, and getting able to dive into other people's perceptions and enhance that communication. And now I'm going to have to go listen to closing time too. So
I know, right? It blew my mind when I found that out. I was like, okay, now I need to go listen to that. And I did. And I was like, yep, there it is. I hear it now. So it's super funny. But yeah, no, I actually have planned for like upcoming sessions. I want to sit mom and my client down, and they're going to take the same lyrics and write about their own personal experience, and then they have to switch, right, and read it. As long as they're comfortable with it. But it's one of those things where it's like you can get two very different perspectives on the same words. So it just really, I really do think it helps with understanding somebody better and feeling that empathy that way, or at least sympathizing with somebody else's experience, right? So we're all different. We all come from different, environments and experiences and lives. So it's pretty cool how you can hear another person's story with the same words that you're, have related to as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. I always appreciate everything that you share with us, right? And being able to spend time today really talking through, like we started at the beginning, right? Like, don't be scared of the word theater, right? Or theater techniques. Like, we can call them whatever makes us feel comfortable, right? They are play-based techniques. We play in theater, we improvise in theater, but we're improvising and playing in our sessions as well. And I think so often too, in the world of play therapy, the longer we're in this world, right? Like, coming up with some nuanced interventions, right? Like, is difficult. We can sort of restructure some of the same games, the same takes, but eventually, right, it's like, okay, this is my tried and true pile of stuff. This is what I'm doing. I'm going to individualize it for each client, but it's still the same stuff. So I love conversations like this where, I'm going, what a concept, right? Again, I think what's going to stick with me the most, right, is what I said, what I heard, what I meant. Like, it's a skill that we do all the time, but wording it that way and being able to bring in that theatrical gameplay aspect of that, right? And going back to negative space, right? And what does that mean? And how can we practice so many of those social skills in a way that's fun, right? And in a way that feels safe. And I love that you talked about, to do that, we have to build that rapport. Like, we may start stiff as a board, right? And how do we build from there? And I tell clients all the time, and I tell their provider all the time, like, I'm not going to ask clients to do things that I wouldn't do, right? And so I love that I've had the opportunity to meet with you between these episodes and try some of them, right? And really be able to verify, right, or vouch for you of like, yes, like, the more we do this, in fact, I've been thinking about, I'm gonna totally butcher the name of it, right? But the storytelling one we did, right, where we lined up.
Oh, pearls on a string. Yeah, pearls on a string.
There's a moment that lives in my brain forever of like, oh, if I could do that over, I have the perfect word for any story situation now. And so I'm like, I want to play this again sometime. And I'm like holding on to this nugget, right? And it's become my Roman Empire. Like, I think about it daily. So
I love that for you, Colleen.
we're gonna do it again at some retreat, and I'm gonna bust it out, and I feel like you're gonna be so proud of me. So I can't give it away. But clients do the same thing, and being able, like we talked about, being able to translate these skills. That's not my forte, right? Like, there was a fear associated with doing that, but once we can start to break out of our shell and then being able to hold on to it, right? And whether that's, hey, I'm holding on to it because this character gave me strength, or I'm holding on to it because I did something I didn't want to and I survived, right? And it was okay. Or I did something I didn't think I could and I did it really well, right? Like, there's so many ways to reap the benefits of these types of interactions and interventions, even if they're not all like directly correlated to what the intervention was. And for parents even, right? Sometimes we just have to like break out of our stiff exteriors, right? And do something, and our kids are going to latch on to like, remember that time you were so silly, right? I don't remember what the intervention was, but like, remember that time you crawled on the floor or whatever? Like, those moments can be altering for some of these family dynamics and relationships. So I always love getting to hear about these. I love seeing the passion in you as you talk about combining these two interests. I am forever excited to see where this continues to go. So for our listeners that have joined us today, Kendra is a wealth of information. She is a bubble of fun, and she is an incredible support for our clients and the children she works with in the community. So if you have any interest in receiving BHIS services from Kendra or her amazing team, right? She oversees an incredible team and teaches them her wisdom as well. But you can definitely reach out to us at Heart Solutions through the website. If you want more information, you can call the 1-800 number. We'll have our website. It's linked here as always. But if you're interested in receiving those BHIS services for your child, please check out our website for more information or fill out that referral form. If you are good to go with services, whether that's BHIS or therapy, but you are interested in signing your child up or a child you know up for theater classes in the Waterloo area, you can visit the Blackhawk Community Theater website. It is www.wcpbhct.org/classes. We'll have that linked. You don't need to remember that. But Kendra has some incredible classes going on in the community as well. So please be sure to check all of that out. Kendra, thank you 1,000 times over for sharing your passions, your interests, your wealth of knowledge with us. Thank you to everybody who is listening today. And don't forget that you need a training.
Thank you so much for joining us today on You Need a Training. We encourage you to share this episode with anyone you think may be interested in learning more about mental health techniques and interventions. Also, make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram to stay up to date with all upcoming training opportunities. And don't forget to listen to our other podcast, You Need a Counselor, where we talk with individuals around the world about their counseling experiences. Heart & Solutions is proud to provide CE-eligible trainings for our counseling community. This training may be eligible for continuing education credit hours through either the National Board for Certified Counselors, provider number 7376, or the Association of Play Therapy, provider number 21-645. To obtain CE hours for today's training, be sure to follow the steps in the description below.